What up, what up? Welcome to my channel where we're doing music covers, original music, album reviews, song reviews, reactions, tier lists, whatever the day calls for. If you like what you see here, please subscribe to the channel. If you have content on here, I'll subscribe to you as well. I am all about supporting up-and-comers on here. My original music can be found at robcary.bandcamp.com. I have one album to my name right now. It is called Communication. It is quite a few years old now, but I am currently in the studio recording the follow-up to that record. It is called Ugly Living, and we are so close to getting a single out there to promote this thing. My pre-order for the brand new Intervals album finally came in, and I know I'm kind of late getting commentary on this record, this long-awaited record out there, but it's just been a very busy time. And when it's instrumental music, I think it's so hard for certain people to get into, and that there's so much more you need to focus on when you don't have like a vocal face to your musical landscape, that you need to take more time to digest something before you make a review on it. But now I think I've heard this album enough times that I can give a good review on it. So let's get into this new Intervals album, Memory Palace. After I'm done dissecting all the tracks, I'll give this album a rating. We'll talk about it a little bit, and then I'll do my quick ranking of all the Intervals releases after this. So let's get into the track by track. The opening song of this album is Neurogenesis, and I reacted to this song. And when I heard this song, I was so blown away by how great it was that it was my first 10 out of 10 rating of 2024. If you're familiar with my content, you know, I'm not a big nitpicker, but I don't give 10 out of 10 to too many things. But this was just every single thing that's great about this current era of the band, done in the best way possible. We got some new musicians playing behind Aaron this time around. I know the bassist name is Jacob Umansky. I watched an interview of his where he was talking about some of Aaron's plans for this album. On this track, there's a guest, an electronic duo, I think from the UK, called Cone Sound. And the synth passages and upbeat electronic beats they provide to this track elevate it in such a great way. And this is one of the best songs I've ever heard them do, being as long time of a fan of this band as I am. And kicking the album off with this song was the smartest thing they could have done. This song was built to be an opener, and it is probably the album's best track, in my opinion, but there's other gold to be found here. The second track, Mnemonic, got a full reaction on that one. It took a little bit of growing room for me to love it as much as I do now, but I did like it right away. But now that it's been fully digested, there's really cool rhythmic choices here. And at this point, I've listened to this song enough times that I do remember most of the things from it just right off of memory. And that's the thing, when you're an instrumental band, if somebody can say that, you're doing something right, because there are so many instrumental bands with extremely proficient players that can't write a song, you know? I mean, shredding isn't enough, you know? These guys get that for sure. The number 3, the first one that I heard not as a single and had to digest when I got the album. And I've listened to this album probably 5 times in full at this point. I think that's enough times to get familiar enough. And this one is definitely more for the diehard fans of this band. This is not one you want to introduce someone who is not super into instrumental music to this band, because the entire song is composed with some very odd time signatures that I couldn't figure out what they were. I mean, I literally Googled the shit to see what time signature this song is in, or time signatures, and it seems nobody else got nothing either. This is definitely one of the most complex songs they've done in terms of a time signature. And outside of that, though, it still just kind of is Aaron doing what he does, just in this really weird time signature. And it works. It's not my favorite track, but it's definitely good. Number 4 was another song that was already released called New Tropic. I did a reaction to that one also. And this is one of those songs where I'm talking about where Aaron does now have some parts that are a little more bleak sounding, a little bit more sad sounding. There's a soft break in this song that does kind of have a depressing and sad sound to it, but then it bounces right back into some very uplifting kind of video gamey, retro video gaming kind of sounds. And there's a retro gamey looking music video to not only go with this song, but all the visualizers I've seen for this album, that kind of imagery is definitely a theme here. Here's a song I really want to talk about. Number 5, Side Quest. If any song on this album was going to come close to topping Neurogenesis for me, this one was it. This song has a guest, and I'm guessing he does the synth work, even though I know that Aaron did a ton of the synth work in this album too, but this one has a little bit of a different vibe. Like, it doesn't feel so much like just the same old scales and stuff. Like, there's more groovy moments, more synth heavy moments, kind of trippy sounding moments. It doesn't overstay its welcome, and there's parts where you can really get into it to a groove, and then there's more parts that really make you think. Like, Side Quest was a really different sounding song for them, and at this point in their career, different ain't bad, you know. And that's where we get to number 6, where it very much is intervals by the numbers. Circuit Bender. The part where everything stopped except the synths, that was one of the highlights of the song. And the way everything came back in and built back into like the feel of the song, and that was towards the end of it, I believe. That was like the highlight of it for me. This song definitely could have benefited from a shorter length. It's not that long, but it just doesn't say a whole lot. It doesn't stand out a whole lot in comparison to your typical interval song. This one is a little bit fillerish, but it's not bad. Number 7, Lacuna. It was cool to kind of see the time signature technicalities by their standards kind of go a little bit more basic for this one, because after Circuit Bender, it was time for something a little bit more jam band oriented with more soul. It's very reminiscent of Circadian, possibly more than any of the other tracks. It's just a breath of fresh air. It's a bunch of fun. All of the synth pads in this song are perfect. I would definitely consider Lacuna to be a highlight track. I really like this one. And that leads us to the closer, number 8, Chronophobia. They close this album with a very by the numbers intervals track that doesn't really have anything unique to admire outside of the amazing technique and the talent of the players on display. But I'm not really so sure I would have closed the album out with this. But in the end, for me, I would say, you know, there were some tracks here and there that struggled to keep my attention just because he's been doing this sound for so long. And when you're an instrumental band, it is very hard to stand out when you've been around this long, and the instrument's got to do all the work and there's no vocalist, you know. So the next time he releases something, maybe it might be time for a little bit of a sound change. I mean, we may have exhausted this sound for all that it's worth, but I mean, either way, this was a really good album. I would probably give it like an 8 out of 10. It's not my favorite intervals record. I definitely think it's a step down from Circadian, their last one. But it's very enjoyable, and some of the best songs they've ever done in their entire career are on this album, especially Neurogenesis. I would probably consider Neurogenesis and Side Quest to be this album's highlights. Galaxy Brain is a very acquired taste, but you got to admire how much work went into writing around these crazy time signatures. I'd probably say the closer, Chronophobia, and hang on, my cat's gonna wreck my whole setup here. No. But I'd say Circuit Bender and Chronophobia, those were the ones that struggled to keep my interest the most. Those were the ones that were kind of fillerish. But this was still a great album, and I'm glad I got it, and I'm glad it's finally here. So I'm going to do my quick ranking of all the intervals releases, and then I'm going to get out of here. The first EP is The Space Between. It was a great introduction to the band. A lot of emphasis on heaviness there. Some really cool spacey things in the beginning intro piece. The closer, Inertia, is what I discovered this project through, and that's still one of my favorites. It's a very solid EP to start off their career. I'll put that one in. If we were doing a tier list, I would put that in the A tier. Then they followed that up with In Time, their second EP, and that is one of the best releases of their entire career, and the one that feels the most like a collaborative effort between all the members that were there at that time. And that was a lineup that I was kind of bummed when they quit initially. Like, I think Aaron did a great job bringing this band back after everybody left into what it is now, and diving headfirst into this new sound and doing it seamlessly when the fourth record came out. But a lot of those records do kind of feel like the Aaron Marshall show. for the most part. Like I say, on this new album, the other musicians definitely shined. I think he's just been kind of switching lineups every album since this shift. But back to In Time, it feels the most like a collaborative effort, and everybody has so much time to shine. Every song is incredible. A great example of this collaborative feel that I talk about is on the song Memento the most. It's just like there's so much going on. Everything's just so in your face, like switching from this part to this part, this solo to that solo, but it's all cohesive and extremely well written and extremely memorable. But I can't pick which song stands out the most. You know, like the closer, Epiphany. That was another one of the first songs I heard from the band. It's extremely good. Tapestry is a more atmospheric piece. It's incredible. I don't know if this is the best, but it might be tied for the best with something else. This is definitely an S tier album. Then we get into A Voice Within, the first full length release from Intervals, and the first one with vocalist Mike Semeski, formerly of The Heart Machine. One thing I really appreciate about this album and that really blew me away about this album is being an instrumental band for so long. Up to this point, a first album with a vocalist and figuring out how to integrate that into your sound could be difficult, and it might take a couple releases to ease into it, but not here, man. They dived headfirst, and Aaron knew when to show restraint and let the vocalist take over. A lot of these songs were written around a vocalist. Like, there was a bit of a sound change here, and they effortlessly made it vocal centric, but still had plenty of moments where the instruments are just going nuts, like on songs like Movement Marauder. Like Ephemeral, the opener, is very anthemic. Like the track Atlas Hour, that entire outro of that song has more of a post rock kind of feel, just some simple grooves and strumming. Like, you wouldn't think Aaron had it in him. Like the show of restraint and being able to dive headfirst into this new style of songwriting. And again, I'm not really hearing any filler on this thing. It is a lengthy album. It is kind of a lot to digest from start to finish, but there's select songs I like the most that I go back to the most. But this is another S tier album. Voice Within, S tier. The Shape of Color, once again, bouncing back from this whole lineup, leaving Aaron and him deciding to just kind of go it alone with some session musicians and write everything, go back to being instrumental, change to this more colorful kind of sound. I'm Awake is incredible. You got Sweet Tooth, Sure Shot, Fable makes the case for this album alone. There's an incredible saxophone feature in that song that just ties it all together so well. There's just so much good on The Shape of Color too, and it stays consistent throughout, and it's amazing too. So that's 3 S tier releases in a row. And then we get to The Way Forward. This one is definitely my least favorite of their catalog, but it is by no means a turd. It just was kind of like a less interesting version of The Shape of Color, and it kind of made me wonder at that time if already we need to do some different things, because like we got what Rubicon Artists, Touch and Go. I mean, I'm struggling to remember like a lot of the songs. I go back to this one the least. So, and it's just so sugary sweet. Like that's really what I think of when I think of this album. Super, super like not overproduced, but just so produced and so squeaky clean and just sugary sweet. Those songs just didn't have the staying power for me that the album that preceded it or the album that comes after it or any of the other albums do. So I'm going to put that one in a C tier rating, but it's a very high C. There are good things in that album. Then we follow that up with Circadian, and the vibe continues, but the songwriting got way more interesting. This was one hell of a bounce back, and there's so much good stuff to say about this one. I got this one on vinyl. Signal Hill is one of the first songs I think of when I think of Intervals, and the opener, 5-HTP, is really good. Earth Thing is one of the first ones I heard that had more of a dreary vibe to it in parts. Like things aren't always so bright and cheery on this record, but for the most part they still are. But Dose is kind of like the fable of this album. There's a saxophone feature in it. It's all just so incredible. Some really cool keyboard work on that track too. Can't say enough good things about this album. I'm sure there's other songs if I had the vinyl in front of me right now I'd think of, but it's another S tier album. And then we get to this new one here. I would put this one in a B tier, a very high B tier, because it does have some moments that drag on. There are some moments that do want a little bit of a sound change, hopefully next time around, but for the most part, they really make it work. All these new musicians that he's working with on this records really shine. Their new bassist, Jacob Umansky, I'm not sure if he was involved with Circadian or not, but he's a really good bassist, and he's one of the stars of the show on here, almost as much as Aaron. Like, this is a really good album, but it's definitely a step down from Circadian. Yeah, I'd give it like a very high B tier rating. So thanks for checking out my review of the new Intervals album. These are just my opinions. Feel free to share your opinions in the comments, and hopefully it won't be so long before I see y'all next time. But until then, thanks for watching.